I never thought I'd be telling this story. It's the kind of thing you bury deep, hoping no one ever finds out. But it happened and I can't change it. It started innocently enough. My best friend Carla and her 19-year-old son Ethan came to stay with me after her divorce. She needed a place to land and I had the space. I didn't think twice. We've been friends for years, the kind of bond that feels like family. Opening my home to her felt natural. Ethan was quiet at first, polite. The kind of boy who nodded more than he spoke, always careful with his words. He'd grown up so much since I last saw him. Taller now, broad shoulders, a calm presence. Still, to me, he was just Carla's son. That was the story I told myself. At first, I didn't notice anything strange. Carla went back to work pretty quickly after moving in, so I saw Ethan more often than I expected. We'd pass each other in the kitchen or the hallway. Sometimes I'd catch him glancing at me. Quick, almost shy, but I thought nothing of it. Teenage boys are awkward. I brushed it off. Then there was the day I came out of the bathroom in my robe. It wasn't unusual. Carla and I were used to being around each other like that. But Ethan was in the hallway. Our eyes met, and for a second he just stared. Not in a childish way, not even in a perverted way. Just focused. I tugged the robe tighter and turned away. He mumbled something, maybe sorry, and disappeared into his room. I stood there for a moment, confused by the way my stomach fluttered. I tried to laugh it off. I told myself he was just surprised. But that look stayed with me longer than I cared to admit. I noticed other things after that. The way he'd linger in the kitchen while I made coffee. The way he leaned in a little too close when asking for the remote. Once, we both reached for the same dish towel and our fingers touched. It lasted no more than a second, but I pulled away like I'd touched fire. He didn't say anything. Just looked at me like he understood exactly what had just happened. I didn't tell Carla. What would I say? Your son is acting strange around me. It would sound paranoid. Or worse, self-important. And yet, something in me had shifted. I started checking my reflection more often. Fixing my hair before coming downstairs. Wearing lipstick even on days I didn't leave the house. It wasn't for him. At least, that's what I told myself. But even I didn't believe it anymore. There was a moment late one evening when Carla had gone out with friends. Ethan and I were watching TV in the living room. Something funny happened in the show and I laughed, reaching for my glass of wine. He laughed too and then turned toward me. His knee brushed mine. We didn't move. I felt the warmth of his leg against mine and it froze me. I couldn't look at him. Couldn't say anything. But I didn't pull away either. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. My mind was a mess of conflicting thoughts. I wasn't stupid. I knew where this was headed if I didn't stop it. But a part of me, the part one didn't want to admit existed, wasn't sure I wanted it to stop. I'd been alone for a long time. Dates came and went, nothing serious. Carla was the only constant in my life. Her friendship had always been my safe place. But I hadn't felt desired, really desired, in years. Ethan's attention, no matter how inappropriate, had awoken something I thought was long gone. The next morning I found a note on the kitchen counter. It was simple. Made coffee. Thought you might need it. His handwriting was surprisingly neat. Next to the note was my favorite mug, already filled. I stood there for a long time, holding that mug, trying to convince myself it was just a thoughtful gesture. But deep down I knew better. Things continued like that for days. Small, almost imperceptible shifts. He started complimenting me, nothing outrageous, just things like, that color looks really nice on you, or, you smell good today. I should have shut it down. I knew that. But I didn't. Instead I smiled. Sometimes I blushed. I hated myself for it afterward. Then came the day everything changed. I'd just come back from a run, sweaty and tired. Carla was out shopping. I grabbed a towel and headed straight to the bathroom. It never occurred to me to lock the door. I never had a reason to before. I turned on the water and stepped into the shower, letting the heat wash over me. It felt good, like shedding the weight of all the confusion and guilt that had been piling up. I closed my eyes and let the water pour down my back. For a moment I forgot everything. And then I heard it, the soft creak of the door opening. I turned instinctively, eyes wide. Through the steam I saw the outline of someone stepping in. I thought it was Carla and opened my mouth to speak, but stopped mid-sentence. It wasn't her. It was Ethan. He stood frozen in the doorway, eyes locked on mine. Time slowed. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. The towel was across the room. My body was completely exposed. I snatched the shower curtain across me, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What are you doing?" I finally managed to whisper, though my voice was shaking. He didn't answer right away. Just stared for another heartbeat. Then he blinked, turned and walked out, closing the door behind him. I stood there, soaked, shaking, confused, horrified, and something else. Something I didn't want to name. I locked the door after that, wrapped myself in a towel and sat on the edge of the tub, too stunned to do anything else. My thoughts raced. I should yell at him. I should tell Carla. I should be furious. But I wasn't. Not exactly. Because a part of me wasn't just scared. A part of me was thrilled. And that terrified me more than anything else. I dried off quickly, my hands trembling as I wrapped the towel around myself. My heart hadn't slowed down since he walked in. I couldn't get his expression out of my mind. Wide eyes, a flicker of hesitation but not shame. He looked at me like he'd never seen me before. I leaned against the bathroom wall, trying to catch my breath. I told myself it was a mistake, that maybe he didn't realize I was in there. But that wasn't true. I had spoken and he didn't leave. He stayed. I avoided him for the rest of the day. Carla came home, cheerful, unaware of the storm that had just torn through her house. I plastered on a smile, made dinner, and said nothing. Ethan didn't speak to me either, but I caught him watching. Not in that awkward, accidental way from before. This was different. Intentional, calm, like he was waiting to see what I'd do next. That night I couldn't sleep. I turned over 100 times, thoughts looping in my head. What did he want? What did I want? I kept thinking about the moment he stepped inside, how I froze, how I didn't yell, didn't scream, didn't shove him out. I asked him what he was doing, but even then my voice wasn't angry. It was confused, curious. And that was what scared me the most. I didn't react like a victim. I reacted like someone caught. The next morning I woke up early, hoping to avoid him. But he was already in the kitchen. When I walked in, he looked at me directly and said, "Morning," like nothing had happened. I nodded, kept my distance. But I felt his eyes following me. As I reached for a glass, I felt his presence behind me. Close, too close. "I'm sorry about yesterday," he said quietly. I didn't turn around. It was inappropriate. I know. I wasn't thinking. "You don't just walk in on someone like that," I said, still facing the sink. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said. I didn't know what I was doing." I turned to face him then. He didn't look away. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked steady, sure. That calmness unnerved me. I expected guilt, but he wasn't drowning in it. Instead, he seemed to be testing the air between us, waiting to see what I would say next. "It can't happen again," I told him. He nodded slowly. "Okay." But that wasn't the end of it. That afternoon I went into the laundry room. I bent down to move a load into the dryer, and when I stood up, he was in the doorway. He didn't speak. Just looked at me, eyes heavy with something I didn't want to name. I brushed past him without saying anything, but my skin burned where his arm grazed mine. He started to appear more, always when Carla wasn't around. Standing too close. Holding eye contact too long. There were no words, no obvious moves, but everything about him felt deliberate. And worse, I let it happen. I didn't correct him. I didn't reinforce any boundaries. I told myself I was managing it, keeping it under control. But really, I was doing nothing. Late that evening, I was in the kitchen again. Carla had gone out. I was wearing leggings and a tank top, nothing unusual, but I could feel his gaze as soon as I entered the room. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, silent. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. "I've been thinking about me." That moment. "There is no you and me," I said immediately, too sharply. He didn't flinch. "Maybe not," he said. "But I felt something. I think you did too." I stood there, frozen, the air between us thick and unforgiving. I should have shut it down harder. Should have walked away. But I didn't. "You need to be careful with what you think you feel," I said. He smiled, slow, calm. "I know what I saw." I walked past him without another word, heart pounding in my throat. I didn't sleep again that night. My thoughts were a mess. I couldn't figure out if I was scared, excited, angry, or all of it at once. His confidence rattled me. He wasn't unsure, wasn't tentative. He wasn't a child. He knew exactly what he was doing, and I was letting him. The next day I found a note on my pillow. Just said, "You look beautiful today. I can't stop thinking about you." I sat there for nearly 20 minutes, holding that slip of paper, unable to move. I should have confronted him. I should have told Carla. I did neither. Instead, I folded the note and slid it into the drawer next to my bed. Later we crossed paths in the hallway. I tried to pass without making eye contact. He stopped me. "Did you get my note?" "Yes." "Do you want me to stop?" I looked at him. Really looked. I searched his face for some trace of doubt. There was none. He stood there like someone who knew the answer already. "I don't know what I want," I said quietly. He reached up, slow and deliberate, and brushed a hair off my cheek. His fingers lingered. I didn't move. I let it happen. We didn't kiss. He didn't say anything else. He just looked at me for a second longer, then walked away. I stood there, paralyzed. The boundary wasn't broken yet. Not fully. But it had thinned, stretched to its limit. One more moment, one more misstep, and it would snap. And I knew. I absolutely knew. I wouldn't stop it. I hadn't stopped anything so far. I told myself I'd draw the line tomorrow. I told myself I'd talk to Carla. That I'd shut it down once and for all. But I didn't. Waited. And he kept coming closer. The next few days unfolded like a slow burn. We didn't speak about what had happened. No more notes, no lingering touches, no hallway whispers. But the silence between us said everything. It wasn't avoidance. It was anticipation. We were both waiting, circling something unspoken, and every day the distance between us felt shorter. Carla remained blissfully unaware. She worked long hours, came home exhausted, and trusted me with everything, including her son. The guilt should have weighed heavier, but it didn't. What I felt was sharper, more dangerous. Desire mixed with denial. I tried to distract myself with chores, with errands, even meaningless phone calls to people I hadn't talked to in months. Nothing worked. He was always in the back of my mind, always just around the corner. One afternoon I came back from grocery shopping and he was helping unload the car. He didn't speak much, just followed me inside, close enough that I could smell his cologne. His presence was becoming too familiar. When our hands touched over a bag of oranges, I flinched, but he didn't. Later, as I was putting things away, he passed by and paused beside me. "I think about you a lot," he said under his breath. I didn't respond. I kept stacking cans, my hands shaking. "I know I shouldn't," he added. "But I do." I turned slightly, not facing him, but not walking away either. "It doesn't matter what you think about. What matters is what you do." "I haven't done anything," he said calmly. "But I would if you let me." That moment sat between us like a held breath. I didn't answer. I didn't have the strength. The honesty in his voice disarmed me. He wasn't playing a game. He meant every word. The next few encounters were short, intense. He brushed by me in the hall and his hand grazed my waist. He leaned too close when asking questions he didn't need to ask. And I, every time, stood still, saying nothing, doing nothing. It was a quiet collapse of morals, a surrender in small doses. Then came the night that sealed everything. Carla had gone out again. It was just the two of us. I was in the living room reading, pretending to be unaffected. He came in, sat across from me, silent for a while. Then he said, "Can I ask you something?" I looked up, cautious. "What?" "Why haven't you told me to stop?" I didn't have an answer. Not a real one. Because every time he stepped closer I stayed still. Because my silence had said more than my words ever could. "You know why," I said finally. He nodded once. "So it's not just me." I closed the book and set it down. "No. It's not just you." He stood up, walked to the doorway and paused. "I'm not going to do anything unless you ask me to." And then he walked away. That should have been my moment to end it. To reset everything, confess to Carla. Put a stop to the tension that had been growing like a weed in my chest. But instead I sat there, stunned by his restraint and more drawn in by it. He wasn't forcing anything. He wasn't pushing. He was waiting for me. The next morning I couldn't focus. I was jumpy, irritable. Carla noticed. "You okay?" she asked over breakfast. "Just tired," I lied. Ethan entered the room and I felt it all over again. That buzz beneath my skin. Our eyes met for half a second, and that was enough to flood me with the memory of his words. "Unless you ask me to." I left the table early, claiming a headache. He didn't follow. He didn't need to. That night I found another note. This time it said, "Still thinking of you. I'm not going to stop unless you tell me to." I stared at the words, heart pounding. My fingers traced the edge of the paper. He was giving me the choice. He always had. But now it was real. The decision wasn't just about what we'd done. It was about what I wanted. And for the first time I admitted the truth to myself. I wanted him. I wasn't proud of it. I wasn't even sure it made sense. But I wanted to feel wanted. I wanted to be seen the way he saw me, without hesitation, without fear. The next day we passed each other in the hall. He stopped and looked at me. I looked back. "Do you want me to stop?" he asked softly. I didn't answer. Instead I reached out and took his hand. It was the smallest gesture. But it said everything. And just like that, the line wasn't blurred anymore. It was gone. The weight of that choice hit me in quiet, lingering ways. There was no dramatic fallout, no sudden shift. Just a slow unraveling of the person I used to be. The moment I took his hand, I knew I had crossed into something irreversible. There was no pretending now. No more ambiguity. I had invited it. I had answered everything he'd been asking without saying a word. The next few days blurred together. We didn't talk about what we were doing. We didn't even look at each other the same way. But something had changed. I felt it in every glance, in the new rhythm of our silence. There was a new kind of tension, heavier, deeper, because now it was real. He touched me when no one was watching. Light brushes of the arm, fingertips against my lower back, grazing my thigh under the table. And I didn't stop him. I welcomed it. I needed it. It wasn't about love. I knew that. It wasn't even about him. It was about how I felt when I was with him. Seen, wanted, alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Every part of me that had been asleep was now wide awake, aching for more. Carla remained clueless, trusting. She laughed with me, shared wine with me, confided in me about her new dates. The guilt should have choked me. Didn't. It lived beneath the surface, like a low hum I learned to tune out. I told myself she'd be fine, that she had her life, and this wasn't about her. But deep down I knew I was dismantling everything between us one moment at a time. One night, she came home early from a dinner date. I was in the kitchen. Ethan was too. We were standing close. Too close. She walked in and we jumped apart like strangers. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and didn't want to. I watched her smile and ask about leftovers, and I nodded along like nothing was wrong. But I felt Ethan's hand brush mine beneath the counter. Hidden, silent, defiant. I couldn't keep pretending. The secrecy was becoming a game we played too well. I started seeing pieces of myself I didn't recognize. I was careful, planned. I waited for moments when Carla was gone. We never spoke about it out loud, never named what we were doing, but we didn't need to. It was all there in our actions. There was a kind of power in it. The stolen glances, the quiet understanding, the thrill of knowing and not being known. But it came with consequence. I started to avoid mirrors. Started to dread the sound of Carla's voice, not because of anything she did, but because she trusted me so deeply. And I was betraying her without hesitation. One morning I caught Ethan staring at me with that same unwavering look. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. Just watched me, like he was memorizing every detail. I looked away. It wasn't sweet anymore. It was consuming. And dangerous. I realized then that I had no idea what he wanted. This wasn't a boy with a crush. This was someone deliberate, calculating in his stillness. I had assumed control. But I had none. Every choice I made brought us closer to something I couldn't undo. And I didn't know how to stop. Carla announced she was taking a weekend trip to visit family. I helped her pack. Hugged her at the door. Watched her drive away without a single clue about what I was doing. That night, everything unraveled completely. There were no more subtle touches, no more waiting. He came to me like he had been waiting for permission his whole life. There was no hesitation, no pretense, just inevitability. And I didn't stop him. Afterward I sat in silence, wrapped in sheets that didn't feel like mine anymore. He looked at me like I had become something sacred. But I didn't feel divine. I felt ruined. The air between us wasn't warm. It was suffocating. And all I could think about was Carla. Her voice, her laugh, her trust. He reached for my hand. I let him take it. But I couldn't look at him. In the morning I woke up before him. I dressed in silence and went downstairs. The house felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. I made coffee, my hands trembling, and stared out the window for a long time. Everything was still. Too still. When he finally came down, he smiled like it was just another morning. I didn't smile back. "We should talk," I said. He nodded but didn't say anything. "I can't keep doing this." "Why not?" "Because it's not real. It's a moment. A mistake stretched too far." It didn't feel like a mistake. That's the problem. I walked past him and left the room. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt hollow. Carla came back the next day. She hugged me, told me she missed me, asked if anything exciting happened while she was gone. Said no. And just like that, life resumed. On the surface. But underneath something had died. I avoided Ethan. Stopped answering his notes. Refused to meet his eyes. He tried to pull me back in, but I was done pretending. I had stepped into something I couldn't carry. And there was no version of this where everyone walked away clean. Eventually they moved out. Carla got her own place. Ethan went back to school. We still talk, Carla and I. She doesn't know. She might never know. But I do. Every time she laughs, every time she calls me her closest friend, I remember. I remember what I became. What I let happen. And no matter how far I move on, that version of me still exists. Waiting. Watching. Regretting.